This story is so long.
Yeah. This story, you know what I'm tired of?
Long stories?
No, not long stories. I am tired of, ew, I am so in love with something, I'm just gonna waste away. By the way, I'm an artist. Is this a ghost or is it my mental health? I understand that we're discussing psychological horror stories right now, but I'm kind of tired of the psychological, and I kind of just want to get back to the horror.
This story actually made me mad.
I don't need to sit around. It's probably just because we're just reading one after another of the same kind of theme, which is guy, and they all kind of have the whole like obsessed guy, obsessed. A lot of them have like I'm obsessed with a dead woman. A lot of them have like I'm a stunted artist. And a lot of them have, like, I'm just going to lie in bed and waste away. And then all of them have, is it a ghost or is it mental health?
I thought it was funny.
What is funny?
This premise of this story.
That he just wastes away? Or
no,
what?
That it's a guy who falls in love with his house.
Not so funny that he seems to have done a murder at the end.
It's not he seems to have done a murder. He did a murder.
Or did the house do the murder?
At a certain point, he's the one who did the murder regardless.
But how did he do the murder? He's starving and wasting away in bed. How did he do the murder? The woman was pretty beefy from all like indications. She's a strong woman. I don't know if she was
beefy.
Well, it says that she's a piece of beef. It doesn't say that.
No, it doesn't.
She's a piece of beef by the end. Roast beef. Because she's
great.
Dead meat.
I like her.
She's great. He's great until he's not. Unfortunately,
he's great for the first 2 pages of this story.
Until he falls in love with the house. Hi, everybody. I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And it's Del Toro
time.
No Del Toro.
Never.
I want to thank Kenneth Haidt, the author of the annotated The King in Yellow, for retweeting our Repairer of Reputations episodes. Because he was Googling himself, I guess, and found our episode and liked it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
no
Kenneth
Del Toro.
Haidt. I'm so glad we didn't insult him. Like, what if I had said, this annotated King in Yellow is Garbo, and I don't want anything to do with it? He would have been offended.
You would have been lying, too.
It's not Garbo. It's great. I loved the annotated King in Yellow. Buy yourself a copy, everyone. But also, some of the King in Yellow filmmakers found us because of that. And we're like, good episode. So let's remember to keep things positive as we go. As I don't have any like particular Oliver Onions experts I'm going to be calling out this time.
I don't either.
Because Oliver Onions, far less interesting of a person than Robert Chambers. Because Oliver Onions just seemed like a pretty nice guy who wrote. And he was married to a woman who was a writer, and who he was like, you should become a novelist as well. And so she became a novelist, and he was like, I love my creative wife. And she's like, I love my creative husband. Let's have some creative kids. And they just all seem to have been a creative writing family who creatively wrote. And then he died in 1961. Like, he lived a long life. Seems like a pretty nice guy that everyone got along with. It seems like everyone kind of liked his writing.
Hated his name.
Didn't like his name. Changed it legally, but kept writing under the name Oliver Onions. He was George Oliver Onions. Was like, I'm just going to legally change my name to George Oliver.
Mm-hmm.
But Oliver Onions, I guess, is a good ghost name. So I'm just going to keep writing under that.
I think it's a great name.
So we are reading David G. Hartwell's The Dark Descent. We are in the third chunk of The Dark Descent called Fabulous Formless Darkness, which is all psychological horror, or is it? And we are on the story The Beckoning Fair One by George Oliver Onions, aka Oliver Onions, born in 1873 in Bradford, Yorkshire. He wrote detective fiction, he wrote romance, he wrote historical fiction, he wrote ghost stories, including the collection Widdershins, which includes this novella, The Beckoning Fair One. And as I mentioned, he was married to the novelist Berta Ruck. Ruck Tales, woo! She was not related, she was not an ancestor of Alan Ruck, the star of Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Wow, really? Who'd have
She's
thought?
not really down. I actually looked. I was like, is she an ancestor of Alan Ruck, one of my favorite 80s actors? Star of Speed and the Exorcist TV series. We love Alan Ruck. We respect him. No, she was not. Changed his name to George Oliver, like I said, yada yada. He was another one of those writers who started as an artist, like a commercial artist. I believe that wasn't our last.
Yeah, Mr. Robert W. Chambers was as well.
What's with that? I guess maybe like commercial art was a lucrative career at the time. Like you could make a living doing it.
It might also maybe similar doors like were opened with commercial art and writing.
Maybe,
like
yeah.
You did art for magazines, and the magazines also had like short stories and stuff in them.
True. And you got to know editors. You got to know the.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing happened with the Berenstains. They started out as commercial artists and started writing. If you're curious, listeners, it's because I also do a Berenstain Bears podcast. In case you don't know, there's my dolls. You can see my whole podcasting life. There's my dolls. There's my horror, and I've got some YA novels down below.
And there's your Twilight box set with all of
and
the
there's
features.
my Twilight box set. Yes, there's my entire podcasting life in a nutshell. Berenstain Bears, horror, and Twilight. But yeah. So he started out as a commercial artist, worked as a magazine illustrator during the Boer War. And he ventured into writing fiction, encouraged by the American writer Gelett Burgess. And Widdershins was like a collection of ghost stories he wrote that people were like, right on.
Apparently, according to our editor, it is one of the rarest and best ghost books of the century.
Why is it rare?
I don't know.
Maybe at the time David G. Hartwell wrote this collection, you couldn't get your hand on Widdershins, but it's been republished a lot of times.
Maybe he means rare as in, like, the quality of the writing is rare for the time.
So I'm going to let you in on a little secret, and it's not a secret. I read a bunch of stuff out of Widdershins. I read a bunch of Oliver Onion's ghost stories. Got kind of sick of it. Maybe it's because I can only handle so much well-written psychological horror. But I was just like, I just need some actual goblins. I just need some ghouls. I need something to actually creep up behind you and grab you and go boo. I don't need people sitting around. I don't need a story that is literally, a ghost story? A spooky story? No, it's a story of a sea captain who's starving and dying of thirst on his boat, who runs into the ghost of a future boat and talks to the captain of this boat from the future.
This story has a character named Madly in it, who went mad.
This character this story has a character whose last name is Oleron, which is a combination of Oliver Onion.
Yep.
Who goes mad, who's a writer.
This is an interesting story. It made me very upset.
What? Okay, so the Beckoning Fair One. Come with us. Let us be your Beckoning Fair Ones into the world of Oliver Onions, into the world of this poor sap who dies or doesn't die.
He doesn't die. He almost makes a good choice midway through the story and then decides not to make the good choice.
What is this story about?
This story is about a man who moves into a house. He doesn't move into a house, actually. He moves into a floor of a house. Because he doesn't want to buy the whole house. Also, I wish mortgages or down payments were just £50 still. That would be great.
Well, he doesn't buy it. He's a renter.
He rents it. But the lawyer tries to convince him to buy it first. It's a shoddy, like, abandoned building with a bunch of to-let boards, which I had to look up what those were because I had no idea what that meant.
It's for rent. It's for rent.
It's for rent. It's just for rent. They're like old and kind of. I really like the imagery at the beginning of this story, where they're like, the signs kind of look like they're gonna fall down and cut someone's head off at any given moment. That could happen.
I like that he's a writer. He's in his 40s.
Yeah.
And I like that he's been dividing his time between like 3 different locations, and he's just like, I'm getting too old for this. I just need to live in one place with all my stuff. As opposed to like, he has like, I think he has like a flat for writing, a place for sleeping, and a place for all of his store. Like, he stores his like dead mother's like
grandmothers.
His grandmothers, yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally a guy going, I'm getting too old for this artistic lifestyle.
Yeah, and he's working on a novel called Romilly Bishop, which is one heck of a name. I
love the name Romilly.
I do too. I think it's great. I think
it's a cool name. I only know of one actual Romilly in the world who's alive right now, who is a cooking like Instagrammer, like a social media person. It is also the sister of a famous podcaster. I'm not going to get into it, but the name Romilly, I was like, that's the only Romilly I know. Yeah.
He moves into this place and is pretty much immediately like, wow, I can't write in here.
Yeah.
He gets really distracted by like decorating and all of that stuff, which understandable. I wrote down on one of the pages, he came to himself at long intervals to find that he had been looking about his room and wondering how it had formerly been furnished. And I was like, that's an ADHD moment right there.
You totally froze while you were reading that. So can you read it again? Because I lost everything you just said. Quality.
He came to himself at long intervals to find that he had been looking about his room and wondering how it had formerly been furnished. Oh, I froze again. Actually, you froze for me this time, but I assume the same thing's happening.
You're totally frozen again. Like,
I think this story's cursed.
Every time you start reading that section, it freezes. Like, you're fine right now.
Yeah.
Can we try it one more time? I just want to see if it happens.
He came to himself at long intervals to find that he had...
That's weird. This is a haunted story. I agree. Like, this guy, he sits down, he's immediately just like, I can't work. Everything is distracting. This place is awesome. I'm going to look out the window. I'm going to look over here. I'm going to explore, but I'm not going to write.
Yeah.
And he finds a bundle of stuff that he doesn't know what it is. He finds some secret compartments. And
in the flower
he
boxes.
has a best friend.
He does have a best friend, and his best friend is the best part of this story.
What?
Are we going to be able to record this episode?
This sucks. This sucks.
This is the universe saying we need to record in person.
Recording in person is so hard because the sound is just a nightmare, and I don't know where to position us. And this is the only way I can think of to record ourselves at the same time talking.
This is awful. It's not working. You're freezing every, like, 0.5 seconds.
I'm already depressed because... Yeah, I'm already depressed because my back is in pain. Now I'm depressed because I can't record my show.
We gotta figure something out. Because for some reason our audio, like, setup is just declining at a rapid pace.
I think you're making a point, but I can't hear you because you keep freezing.
My point was about the freezing.
Perfect.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't know what it could be, though, because everything else works fine. Is it Zoom?
I think it's just my stupid internet connection. I think it's me.
Okay.
Well, now you're not freezing. Now you're not freezing. Now you're just dancing.
All right, here we go.
Does it cycle? Is it in weird cycles?
I think it might. Is there like... I don't understand.
I blame Alana. Hold on, I'm going to open the door.
Yeah?
Maybe it'll let in more Wi-Fi. I'm opening the door to let in more Wi-Fi. Maybe this will work.
I want to clarify something, because we got a comment on one of our...
Hold on. That's just to signal, because maybe I'll do a hard edit.
Yeah. We got a comment in one of our episodes about me seeming like I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
That was just me being frustrated with the internet connection.
That's why it was the worst episode we've ever put on YouTube, because there's no me.
Yeah.
And you look sad the whole time. And I guess maybe I was being aggressive or something. I don't know. But yeah, the YouTube comment said that it seemed like I was just being a jerk and that you didn't want to be there.
It was the worst episode, because I think also that was the worst delay we'd ever had.
Yeah, at the time.
And I was like, this is really annoying and frustrating.
So, our protagonist.
Our protagonist is named Oleron, which is an awesome name. Oleron. Yes. He belongs in Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. He moves into this house because he thinks it looks neat, I guess. He decorates it, and then he wants to keep decorating it. He moves some flower boxes around and finds a mysterious cloth. And then he's like, whatever, that's cool. I should go back to work. And he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. He has a best friend. Her name is Miss Benno. I think that's how you pronounce her name?
Benoff. Bino. Her name is Miss Bino.
She's awesome. She's a journalist.
Bengo.
Miss Bengo.
Bingo. Miss Bingo.
Miss
Elsie
Bingo.
Bingo.
She's awesome. She's a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
She's pink as a dog rose, which is very pink from what I learned.
And she's a bit of a no nonsense, friendly lady who's madly in love with our protagonist.
Supposedly.
I think she's in love with our protagonist. I think she's in
love with him too. But we only ever get his side of everything. And she dresses really awesomely, and she's really smart, and she deserves better.
Right. So you get the sense from the big conversation they have in the beginning of the story that they have an old friendship. Mm-hmm. They are intellectual equals. He enjoys her company. Unfortunately, even the first time you get to see them together, he's already succumbing to something.
His first name is Paul.
Yeah? Is that a point? Are you making a symbolic point?
I don't know why.
Does he cast a pall over the story?
I don't know why, but the name Paul just doesn't fit him.
Paul Oleron. Yes. He's our hero.
Paul the hero. No offense to all of you Pauls out there.
We have these two main characters, though, Paul and Elsie, and they used to be best friends, but as he degrades, his mental state begins degrading or something in this place, he becomes a jerk to her. Not
even just a jerk. He becomes an insufferable donkey.
He becomes a donkey, but okay, can I step back for a second? Mm-hmm. This story... And maybe it's just because I just finished rereading this book for the first time in years. This story is like The Shining. It's The Shining in microcosm. Not the movie The Shining, the novel The Shining. It is the story of a writer who's halfway done with a major project, moves into a place that starts maybe warping his mind, or maybe it's just his own mental health, but the place becomes jealous of him, like wants him all to itself, and turns him into a homicidal... chauvinist jerk. And literally that is The Shining. Like in a nutshell, this is like a tiny Shining. It's like, what if The Shining happened, but it was only on the floor of a rundown place of flats. And
also it was 1911 in, I think, England.
And
it's either England
haunted
or Wales.
Yes, this is in England. Or Wales.
I think it's England because he mentions... He has a housekeeper lady, like his landlord's wife, has a Welsh accent from a particular place in a Welsh county that I can't pronounce because it's Welsh.
Because it's Welsh. Right. The first interaction we have is between him and the guy who rents him this place, and he arranges for the guy's wife to be the housekeeper. That falls apart, partly because he's good friends with Elsie, who the neighborhood...
the neighborhood's very religious.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just in that sort of general, like, religious when it suits them to be judgmental.
Yeah.
And so rumors start flying about his relationship with Elsie, about his relationship, the nature of it. But also, the house itself seems to start attacking her.
Pretty much immediately.
Physically. Yeah. She cuts her hand. At one point, she falls through the stairs.
That scene upset me so much.
Why?
Because of her reaction and, like, how upset she was. It made me really sad.
Because she's such an awesome person.
She is. She is so awesome. She's a journalist. She's like a really good critic of his work. She's like spent all this time being like, here's like stuff to do to fix it and like blah 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 blah. She's smart.
Right. And she's probably the basis for the character of Romilly Bishop in his story. So that's kind of this weird parallel. So he's writing this story about a woman named Romilly Bishop who's super independent. She's a great character. You don't know if Elsie really likes the book because it's good or because it's just based on her, but she really seems to like this book. He's on chapter like 15 of it. And
yeah.
At one point he starts going, no, this book isn't working. I need to trash the whole thing and start over. But you get the feeling that he gets the feeling that it's because the house itself is jealous of the attention he's giving to Elsie. And the house, or maybe it's a ghost in the house, wants him to write the book to be more about a different kind of woman. A woman who's more like the house, or more like the woman who haunts the house. Or maybe there's no ghost in the house. Maybe it's just the house.
Maybe the ghost is his grandmother.
Or maybe it's the ghost of his grandmother who's in love with him. We don't know. But he does.
And then we get into Freud, and that's just a whole mess.
He does kiss the ghost on his bed at one point. There might be sex, but we're not sure. Because this whole thing is kind of like a fever dream. Yep. Also, another artist has died in this house, we find out.
And his name is Madly. And that's awesome.
Madly, he went mad. Madly went mad. Starved himself to death. Gave up on life. Starved himself to death in this house.
There's questionably suicide. He starts freaking out about Elsie committing suicide at some point. And then he's like
freaking out about the house killing her, maybe.
Yep.
Also, he starts hating her because she's a know-it-all busybody, even though she's not.
Yeah, she's just worried about him.
But in much the same way, The Shining gets into the head of Jack Torrance and is like, you see his mental degrading, also the way it turns him against his family, but also the way he's kind of fights it at times, like to care about his family. The exact same thing happens with Paul Oleron. You're privy to the degree, like his mind just crumbling and how it turns him against his best friend.
And somehow, in all of this that's happening, there's a kitchen sink.
Oh yeah, we get
which is the basis for the name of this story.
Because you know how in cartoons there will be a repetitive noise, and then like a duck will start playing like the pots and pans, and then like the traffic outside will be like the guitar, and then people will start singing a song like in a Goofy movie.
The sink is plunking water because it's like the faucet's loose or whatever, and he starts humming along to it, and his housekeeper, Miss Bennett, is that her name? Barrett, is like, I know that song. That's a really old song. And he's like, song? She's like, yeah, it's called The Beckoning Fair One. And he's like, that's the name of my new novel because the house.
Yeah. He somehow knows this song he's maybe never heard before. That's also, so the apartment is like, plink, plink, plink. Plink, plink,
it's like
plink, plink,
it's like
plink,
it's
plink,
like
plink. And he's like, yes, 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 beckoning, beckoning, a fair one. And the housekeeper's like,
it's a
this
Disney
is a great
movie.
Song. Oh, Paul Oleron, why are you singing songs? Singing about the Beckoning Fair One. And then the hat boxes are all like, and the rug's like,
me of. It's like Enchanted. Not Enchanted. Yes. What is it called? Yeah. No, is it Enchanted where she gets thrown in the well and then comes out in the real world? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The birds are outside his window. They're like...
It's important, though, because Elsie sees the fabric and is like, that was like a thing used like as like a harp thing.
Yeah,
and the
it's
song,
the bunched up fabric that he finds is actually you wrap a harp in it before you put it into a harp case.
And the song was usually sung to a harp is why it's important.
It is kind of vague. We don't know if a harpist ever lived in this house, but apparently someone did who had a harp. Or I guess they had a harp. I guess when they moved, they took the harp, but they didn't wrap it up.
Well, the harp comes back later. It just kind of appears, doesn't it?
I think that what they are saying is take care of your musical instruments. Or
you will be haunted and driven mad by them.
Or
it wasn't
fall in
a house
lust with them.
It wasn't a
woman.
A it was a harp the whole time.
You get to kiss a ghost.
You get to kiss a ghost. But he starts sort of losing it, and he realizes that Elsie's in love with him, and he's like, I was never in love with her. I don't think that's true.
No, absolutely not.
He was totally in love with her.
We read a story before. It was the Jolly Corner that had like we are old friends, but we've never actually admitted our feelings towards one another. The Jolly Corner, strangely enough, ends on a happier note, even though it ends on a pretty gloomy note with him like being cradled in her arms. At least they admit their feelings for one another. This ends differently, but we'll get to that.
He's like really freaked out by the fact that she's in love with him, even though it's complicated. He's getting upset. He stops leaving the house until at some point he hears the sound of a woman brushing her hair, and he freaks out and just leaves and is like, I'm gonna go drink at a place. And he's sitting in this like pub, like kind of like, I guess maybe speakeasy is a better, it's not great. It's not a great place.
It's not a speakeasy because it's legal.
No. Yeah. It's just like
it's a what do you call them? Something house, a public house.
Yeah. And he's drinking brandy, and he's sitting there and he's like, I can't go back to that house. There's something in the house. There's something in the house. And then he's like, I don't know. I could not figure out his train of thought.
Oh, I think it's that he gets far enough away from the house to clear his mind, but he's still like pulled back to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's fair. Indeed,
it's that thing where if he had just walked away, he'd be okay, and he would be like, "Wait a minute, my book was good. Wait, what's going on? This doesn't make any." But because he goes back, it kind of just like
Yeah. I'm going to imagine a world in which he doesn't go back. He finishes the book and he marries Elsie and everything's happy. That's not what happens.
Because originally he's going to burn the book, but then he just hides it. But then Elsie finds it, and that's when she cuts her hand on the wood or on the nail. But he eventually does burn his original novel.
Yeah, when he's really far into, because he gets obsessed with seeing this mysterious woman that may or may not be there,
right?
And he's like, I'll make her jealous so she'll come out. And then he's like, what am I doing? Of course she's not going to come out if I've still got the object of my split attention sitting on the windowsill. I'd better get rid of it.
Yeah. And he definitely believes that there's a ghost in this apartment. He also at one point has this big fantasy about what if he dies there and he becomes the ghost. Like if he haunts the apartment. And it reminds me a lot of, I think it is the Jolly Corner. That's a theme in the Jolly Corner where our protagonist is like, I'm going to go haunt my old house. And then he thinks of himself as haunting the ghost who lives there. This is like, he imagines what it's like if he was the ghost of the house. It gets very inside itself. Also, he may just be depressed. He may just have agoraphobia. He may just have anxiety and writer's block. Like,
yep. I mean, the beginning of it especially reads a lot like a midlife crisis.
Yeah, he's in his 40s. He doesn't have any friends except Elsie. He's devoted his life to books that nobody really cares about, stories no one really wants to read. But he's got a contract. That's the big thing. He's been hired. He has a contract to finish this novel. His publisher is like, when you gonna give me the pages? So he's got something in the future. And it is that thing where it's like, can I possibly live up to this expectation? Like, life was easy when nobody expected anything of me.
Mm-hmm.
But now people expect something of me. Also, I'm running low on steam and creative energy. And now I've got this friend who's very supportive, but also kind of breathing down my neck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of hard when you have someone who's like, this is great, just keep going. Because then you're like, well, now there's expectations. So there is that feeling too of like the pain of inspiration, the hopelessness of inspiration. Or it could be a ghost. It could be a sexy ghost.
I don't think it's a ghost. I think it's the house. I think the house is sentient.
Well, he loses his housekeeper because of having a female friend and the rumors that start spreading around him.
Yeah.
And one thing I like about Elsie is she's a reporter and she's a very good journalist in a world that like is not kind to women journalists.
Yeah.
Like, so she's fought this her whole life. She's also like jealous of him because she thinks of him as an artist and herself as just she's just like, I just do a job. Like, I'm not creative like you are. Even though she's a successful journalist, which, as anyone who's done journalism or nonfiction writing knows, requires just a different kind of creativity. Like, it's
it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. She subordinates her own accomplishments as a way of being a supportive friend. So I don't think I think she has her own stuff to work on, but it adds a layer to her personality that I find very, very charming, because she's otherwise extremely confident.
Yeah.
And she just doesn't care what society thinks about her.
She wears awesome clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And is awesome.
Yeah. We love her.
And you know what? I think she does a good job at setting boundaries later on in the story. Because she runs into him when he's coming back from something.
Yeah,
he's coming back from he's coming back from a movie. She meets with her. God, wow, my brain just completely.
Yeah, it's okay. We don't really need to know where he's coming back.
Anyways, they see each other. He's like, I gotta keep her away from the house so she doesn't get killed by the house. And she's like very aloof and kind of like, okay. Because he's like, I was just going out. And she's like, I don't believe you for for a second.
Yeah.
And he brings her to the bus and sits down with her. And she's like, look, I am worried about you. And I think that there's something really wrong with you. But you're not accepting help or whatever. And clearly we're not, like, something's going on. And he's like, I don't want to be with you in a romantic relationship. And she's like, okay. Well, I'm not going to call on you if I need you, but if you need me, I will come if you need me, so just feel free to call.
I just got through rewatching the Mike Flanagan House on Haunted Hill, or Haunting of Hill House, god dang. Haunting of Hill House. And there's so much about addiction and mental illness, of course, in that series, that this reminds me of. She's literally handling him like you handle a loved one who is in the throes of addiction, and you know you cannot help them. So you have to make the choice and draw that hard line and say, I love you, but I cannot save you. Unfortunately for Elsie, she does not listen to her own internal monologue, because things don't go well at the end of this story.
No, it's really sad.
There is a sharp shift in perspective in the last chunk where all of a sudden we are like in the heads of the crowd outside, a crowd outside. Because he gets completely lost in delirium. And he thinks he hears Elsie at one point. He thinks he hears a ruckus. he thinks the ghost is doing something in his place, but he's not really sure what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing we know, there's a crowd outside and the cops are coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our landlord is like, something's going on in there. And
Yeah.
the cops burst into the house. They don't burst in. They, like, go in and start looking around. And they're like, somebody needs to call a hearse, because it stinks. Real bad. Yeah. And they go in. And we don't get any, like, narration of them really finding Elsie.
Right.
They find something, and they're like, what was her name? And they're like, it was Elsie, or whatever. Because it switches back to his perspective. And he's, like, in and out of consciousness, doesn't really understand what's going on. He gets brought out of the house, kind of like in a delirious state, and people are calling for him to be like killed.
Yeah.
But we get the gist or the idea that something has happened to Elsie.
And yeah, she is her body or the body is in the harp bag.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and he is like starving to death though. Like he is.
Yeah.
He cannot get out of bed. Like, they have to carry him out. They carry him out, and they carry the other thing out. You know she's dead when, at the very end of the story, the last line of the story is like, his vehicle turns off to go to the hospital. Her vehicle turns off to go to the morgue.
Yeah.
And that's it. We don't get a real ending. We don't find out exactly, but you get the sense that what he thought was her being attacked by the house was him attacking her. Or something. It's left deliberately vague.
Also, he keeps buying flowers.
Right.
With the little money that he has left. He just fills the house with flowers.
Yeah, which eventually become dead flowers. So the house reeks of dead vegetation, filth, like his own personal filth, and then eventually the corruption of the body that's in the harp bag. In the house. Elsie's dead at the end. The poor thing didn't deserve this ending.
She deserved to be happy and to win awards for her journalism. Yes. I'm so mad at this story. Why is it that
darn
every
you,
horror
writer's
story,
block?
Why
What?
is it that every horror story introduces an awesome female character and then she gets murdered at the end or commits
Not the
suicide?
Jolly Corner ends with her okay. She just is sad.
Yeah, well, why can't any of the horror stories end with them being happy?
Yeah, we had the one about the old man who goes crazy waiting for his boy lover ghost to show back up. Like, that's another sad one, like wasting away. We had another wasting away story, a guy who was waiting for a ghost to show back up. I can't remember. We've done a bunch of these. Like this, like 7 Nights in America or whatever, like 7 American Nights. They all like there's this constant theme of like frustrated creativity, the presence of a woman or a lover that you cannot have, that you see and you obsess over, like that, not how that ruins a person. And I'm wondering if it's just the era these all came out in. Like because we touched on Freudianism last time, like this not Freud, but what's his face, the dreams guy, who was we talked about him last time.
I don't remember.
The post Freud, I can't think of his name, the guy who was obsessed with dreams.
Yeah,
all these concepts of like the subconscious, early psychology, depression, the shifting of how the world is moving on, how we're moving from like this like the sort of repressed classical era into the repressed modern era, because we see like the landlord and all the people in the area are super religious and judgy and throwing their own prejudices like onto him. So he can't find support outside of the house. He's already alienated his friend who is a woman. So we have like sort of like the sexual revolution. We have like gender. We have like, he's surrounded by this positivity of her being an awesome person, but also like the society telling him no. There's all these different things that sort of crushing down on him, like all represented by this house, this beautiful but repressive place that has its own past and history and maybe a ghost and harps and the Beckoning Fair One. I don't know. It's everything. He's doomed from the start, it seems to be.
But he's not, though.
Right.
But he's not, though. Everything that happens, he makes the choice to go to.
But that's also unfair if it is mental health, where
Yeah.
there is no recourse for him at this
That
point.
is, yeah.
He's an isolated individual. He has no support circle.
It's rough. And it's
Yeah.
rough, and I get that it's rough. But also, why do all of the awesome women have to die?
She didn't
Why?
have to. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Ollie Onions, who is, by the way, married to a writer and in love with a writer and names his protagonist after himself. So, you know, there might be some personal issues going on here too, like his own feelings of inadequacy, his own like a writer's feelings of inadequacy. It's a Stephen King thing. All of his Stephen King has so many protagonists who are writers. So many protagonists.
I actually mentioned that because there's so many stories we've read by famous authors, and it's always just like the main character is a writer who has problems.
Right.
And I'm like, really?
There's something
I
that
guess
Stephen
write what you
Sondheim-
know is an accurate statement.
Stephen Sondheim said that there's nothing an audience cares less about than an artist's like personal problems, like how hard it is to create art. He's like, and every artist at some point makes the mistake he did with Merrily We Roll Along, of writing a show or a story or a musical or whatever about, gosh darn it, how hard it is to create the thing that the audience is supposed to enjoy. And he's like, and no audience wants to hear you complaining about you creating your art, even though it's the one thing you can really write well about.
Yep.
Because it's your personal experience. I think horror writers get away with it because they manage to disguise it.
Yeah, it's easy. It's not easy, but it's easier to, when it comes to like adding horror to an element of your own like personal issues.
Right.
It's easier to like mask it because the audience is distracted by ghouls and ghosts.
We do love ghouls and ghosts. I don't know. I read this and I'm like, this is objectively a great story. Mm-hmm. Like Oliver Onions,
Fantastic.
very good writer. These characters,
Awesome.
very well drawn. My feeling at the end of it, kind of tired of this story. And maybe it's just, like I said, maybe it's just because Hartwell put all these stories one after the other that I kind of wish, like, maybe I just want a story about a swamp monster.
I don't know. There's also like Shulkin the Painter from our last.
True.
I feel like this is just a very common story,
especially in this era.
Especially
and all
in this
these
era
stories
and
are
in
coming
this
from like the
genre.
turn of the century.
Yeah. The Repair of Reputations was a very good like chunk of text that was not that for the most part.
Yeah, so then we have Repair of Reputations, which at least is weird in so many ways. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, oh, you think you're just dealing with a crazy guy? Well, how about this guy with wax ears? Like, okay, like, there's so much else going on. And to an extent, like, even Seven American Nights, which is like, you're in a weird dystopian future.
There's been, like, I was gonna say Smoke Ghost, but there's a lot of... a lot of that, like, oh, a guy is falling apart.
Yeah.
In that as well. But Smoke Ghost also ends with weird, like... And then you realize it's an eldritch horror and not a ghost at all, and you start a cult. It's fine.
Yeah. What was the one? Oh, God, there was something we read that we were just like, oh, the Clive Barker story, which I don't even remember what it was. That we were both like, eh. Like, it wasn't about this. Dread, yes. But it was so try-hard in the other direction that I kind of wished for, like, subtle psychological horror after reading that.
Yeah.
Or The Whimper of Whipped Dogs,
God.
which, like, at least this one didn't have, like, a blood ghost in the sky, like, and, like, wagging. At least this story and these stories aren't wagging their finger at the reader and going, like, I know better than you.
These stories do the opposite. These stories are like, I don't know anything, help me.
Exactly. And you know what? I think I would rather that than the finger wagging of a Harlan Ellison or a Clive Barker, who is like, you're the problem, society. Like, we get it. Like, society's the problem. But it loses its flair after a while.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's really easy to say, well, this wouldn't have happened if not for capitalism. But you're not making much of a point after a while. You're just repeating memes.
Yep.
And I'm starting to feel that a little bit with these stories, but I have to admit that Oliver Onions is a really good writer.
He's a really good writer. And you know what? It's easier to digest these stories over and over again simply because it's not like offloading all of the responsibility onto other people rather than taking personal responsibility.
Right.
It goes a bit too far in the other direction where it's like everything is internal and the outside world and blah, 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 blah. But I do think that these stories at least these stories have cool characters in them.
The stories have very cool characters in them. I tried to find the song, The Beckoning Fair One, so I could play it. Mm-hmm. But it's actually a song called Simlin Ben Bis. I can't pronounce. It's Welsh.
Yeah.
A favorite tune of the great pastoral poet Dafydd ap Gwilym.
Okay.
From like the 1400s or something. But it basically translates to, and this is from actually from Tor.com's discussion of this story.
Yeah.
Ruthanna Emrys, I believe she's the author, or no, it's not Ruthanna. It's the other writer.
Does it contain the line? Where is it? I did a bit of my own translating because I wanted to know what it meant. Oh my god. I wrote too many notes in here. Orcs light Jupiter's darkness.
No, that's not what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about that the song itself, titled, translates roughly to the unsophisticated she-fool, or the she not so fool who twists unwary he-fools around her finger as they...
Incredible.
That's their interpretation of it. But it's telling that this story is named after the term succubus gets thrown around a lot when people discuss this story. And I believe he only mentioned succubus once in there. It's typically classified as as a succubus tale, as an evil demon woman. But I find it so much more of a psychological story than an external demon story that I really hesitate to classify it as that. Again, maybe it's just because I've read so many of these, but I kind of think a lot of this is all in his head. So
I agree. I think I just like the idea of him falling in love with a house.
He does fall in love with the house. Our house in the middle of our street.
Also,
our house is where we refuse to eat and kill our girlfriends.
Murder our best friends.
Murder our best friends.
Also, I like that just in the house itself, it could be considered fair because of how pale and stuff it is. Like it's all like white and stuff. I don't know. I like the imagery. I feel like this would be a really good setting. It could be considered a gothic piece, but I think it would be a really good setting for like gothic with an actual ghost in the house. That maybe you catch a glimpse of out of the corner of your eye, but it could just be a shadow against the white wall because it's the same color as the ghost. I don't know. I think it could be fun. Maybe I'll write a short story set in this house and make a bunch of homages to the Beckoning Fair One.
I think it's open for that. Like, what else happens if you... I watched 2 adaptations of this. There was an hour-long adaptation done in like the 70s for British television. And then there's a 20-some minute long adaptation that was done just a couple of years ago as an independent film, which is available on Vimeo if you look it up. And it's very watchable and very interesting. And the television adaptation was long, but interesting, but talky. Like a little too long for the source material. But very relatively faithful. They changed him to like a painter instead of a writer because it's more visual that way.
Madley was a painter.
Madley was a painter. But the short adaptation was interesting in that it's all narrated. There's no dialogue. It's a voiceover. Basically, just they've edited the story down to its bare bones. but then it's sort of performed for you. And like, as things are said, you just see the actors like changing their facial expression, but they are essentially silent film actors.
That's awesome.
Cuts away a lot of the chaff. Like it reduces the story down to its basics. But it's very worth watching. Just look up Beckoning Fair One on Vimeo, and it's like I said, it's like 25 minutes long. It's really quick. It's set in modern times. Like they don't go out of their way to like make it look like the turn of the century. But it's the performers are very attractive as well. So very nice faces to look upon. But when you pare the story down to its essentials and tell it all through sort of representational imagery, it really emphasizes the psychological aspect of it.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about the fact that at one point he saw the hairbrush combing invisible hair, like sort of floating in the air. Like there's a lot of wackiness. In
front of the picture of his grandmother.
Right.
Which is why I was like, it's his grandma's ghost, obviously.
Gigi. That's what GG stands for. It stands for Grandma Ghost. Let's bring this discussion to a close, however.
Right, we don't want to go as long as we did last time.
We don't need to go as long as we did last time. But what is our next dive?
There was one more thing I wanted to say about this story, though, and I can't remember what it was. And now I'm sad.
Sad like Elsie Bingo?
Oh, he becomes afraid of light at some point.
Just like us.
He becomes afraid of light, which I thought was interesting. And you know, I was going to say something about the painter.
Man.
Oh, the story reminded me of The Repair of Reputations a little bit, just because of the part of the central part of this story is like a novel or a play or whatever. And I thought it was interesting because he mentions at the time like the idea that Madley the painter may have painted the halls of this house. Like the house was trying to immortalize itself through other people's writing.
Yeah.
And how it seemed like the house was feeding on his energy rather than being obsessed or in love with him. I don't know. It just made me feel like maybe the house was trying to live rather than it being a ghost that was obsessed with him or wanted it to be obsessed with him.
And that's the Shining connection too, because in the novel of The Shining, the Overlook is the entity itself, and it's draining the people who have the Shining. Like the more psychic you are, the more it wants to drain your, so it can live again. And so yeah, there is that aspect of it. I agree with you. I think it's just a goblin house.
Yeah.
It's
a monster house that needs to be defeated by 3 teenagers or preteens with
to kill the actual heart in the basement.
Exactly.
Yeah. Didn't we see that movie?
We did, yes.
Yes, we did. Okay. What is our next dive into the dark descent?
What was it?
What was what?
Our next... that's the story. What was it?
Oh! You did it! You did the joke and it worked. Who wrote it?
Fitzjames O'Brien.
What
which is
a great
an awesome name.
Fitzjames. If his name was Fitzjames O'Brien Onions, it'd be perfect. Yeah.
Fitzjames O'Brien? Maybe? It has an E, not an A.
Who knows? I don't know. What was it?
Exactly.
What?
That's
exactly?
going to be a joke that's made too many times in our next episode.
You know what I'm going to bet? I bet we're the first people to ever make that joke.
You know what? You're probably right.
Oh boy. As I do research, I bet I will be coming across many a blogger who has made some sort of joke based on the title of What Was It? By, what's his name? Blarney O'Shaughnessy?
Fitzjames O'Brien.
Fitzjames O'Brien.
The heir apparent to Poe in America before his early death in the Civil War.
Uh-oh. On which side?
We're gonna find out next week.
We're gonna find out next time. What was it? A Confederate bastard or a Union hero? We don't know yet. Who knows?
He died during the Civil War. Maybe he was neither.
Maybe he was just crossing the street and was run over by
a horse.
By a horse. It didn't say he died fighting. So join us next time for What Was It?
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
Was it a ghost or was it something else?
Civil War ghosts. No, he couldn't have written about Civil War ghosts because he died during the Civil War. We'll find out about Fitzjames O'Brien next time when we go deep into
Bear Country.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And we'll see you when it's Del Toro time.
Goodbye.
And if you've written a story, a book about the next story, or this story, retweet us. Goodbye.
I stopped recording already.
I didn't, because I'm a powerful man. Goodbye.